introducing one of the most interesting people I've ever heard present. So I'm raising the bar, Gary. Gary Schwartz will be talking to us about, I think it's supposed to be called the Internet of Things, but I'm going to rebrand it as the Internets of Thing, because in keeping with yesterday's, the Google, I think it just should be branded differently. Gary is really an expert in this area, and has had one of the most interesting awards I've ever heard, which was the Mobile Commerce Evangelist of the Year. So we've seen Gary at a HEDNA before, and it's always very exciting. He's in the process of writing a new book called If Things Could Speak, and today he's really taken his research and has applied it to the hotel industry. So I think it's going to be a great hour. So Gary, if you could come up, thank you very much. Thank you. Gary Schwartz, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a clicker here. Great. Well, it's so great to be here, and yeah. So I do a lot of things in the mobile industry. I've been running mobile companies for about 14 years, and I focus on consumer engagement. Right, so consumer, you can call them whatever you want. Citizen engagement, if I'm working with cities. Obviously, consumer engagement, shopper engagement, if I'm working with retail. And you guys, we call them guests. But ultimately, it's developing a sticky relationship with a consumer that is more and more mobile, more and more independent, and we have to somehow follow them from their waking hours through to their booking in the cloud, through to door swing into hotels. And so I thought I'd talk to you today specifically about how the world is changing yet again, right? And digital, as we know it, is about to explode further than it's ever, it's ever been, manipulated within our world before. So what we as an industry have always thought of digital is a little pond, really, right? We access it through the browser, we access it through the app storefront. But what is happening right now, and what we're going to be talking about today, is the fact that digital can permeate every single aspect of our lives. And what I mean by that is all the inanimate objects around us can somehow become more interactive, have heightened ability to engage us, to delight us as guests. And it's a humongous opportunity for the hospitality industry. And I'm very excited. Why? Not only because I'm talking to you guys about something that I believe will impact your industry significantly, but also because I'm on the tail of CES in Vegas. I was there last week. And you can see that this is the year that we're seeing that sea change. So I'm going to be chatting about If Things Could Speak. I do a lot of things in the mobile arena. As indicated, I write books on the subject with Simon Schuster. I head up trade organizations and drive standards, and I believe this is going to be the next big thing for you guys. So we're going to start way back in the 80s, right? And we're going to start with good old logistics, right? So as you probably remember, there was suddenly this huge opportunity with companies to track their assets. And it had value. It had a value to all verticals, including yours. And so what happened is that you had an object, a nano object like a truck, and you took some sort of digital duct tape and you attached it to some server, right? And this was called M2M, machine to machine. Right? And what this was used for was asset tracking, right? Smart grids, building automation, and continues to be a huge pillar of how we run our businesses on a B2B basis. There's no C in there, right? So what we have right now is we have a stormtrooper type approach to the world, right? As we know, as Star Trek aficionados, is that behind a stormtrooper there is a person, somebody from the galaxy, some description, some color, behind this suit. But ultimately, he's an android as far as we're concerned. And that's why with Lucas Productions, we could shoot them with impunity, right? And that's why it was PG to shoot one of these guys, because there was no apparent human in the picture, right? What is happening right now is we're taking M2M, the machine aspect of M2M, and stripping it, and we're putting the human back in the picture, and the machine behind the human. We're introducing the C into the equation. The consumer that needs to understand that they're not talking to a machine, they're talking to something that's ambient, that exhibits characteristics that they feel familiar with, and they can bond to and engage with, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to take you back, and we chat about this in Brussels as well, but I have to take you back because this is pivotal to understanding where we are in life and thought. Here's Bill, right? It's back in 2001 at the defunct Comdex show in Vegas. And Bill is introducing this tablet. Now, as we know, Bill thought that this tablet was super cool. Why did Bill think this tablet was super cool? What he said was that we believe the tablet is going to have significant impact to the industry. We're going to sell more of these tablets than we're going to sell historically all the PC combined. And the reason that Bill thought that this was the case was he said, and I quote sort of vaguely, that all of our engineers are taking these things home. They love them. Well, what does that indicate to you? An engineer loving something is loving a machine. It's loving the technology. There was no human interface to these things. This is before compactive touch. You had to use what to interact with it? Yeah, you use a stylus. And as I indicated in Brussels, you know, what did Steve Jobs said? What did he say about styluses? Do you remember? Yeah, exactly. You're born with 5 of them, right? And so what happened between 2001 and 2007 is really the transformation from the stormtrooper through to the human interface. And when Steve Jobs stood on the stage in 2007, he wasn't presenting technology. To be honest, a lot of the things that he was presenting with the iPhone had happened the year before or 5 years back. Compactive touch was around already. People could pinch and zoom into data. The Prada LG had launched 2 months before. So he wasn't selling technology. What was he selling? He was selling the ability for this machine to have a human interface, right? And so the pinch and zoom into your photographs, the ability to touch the screen in a very human way, the ability to access data where you didn't have to think of it as data was profound. So to jump into maps was the first step in the map revolution. The ability, you know, what we do now with maps and the ability to jump in and find local search all came from this. This was profound. Up until this point, this thing called a phone that Steve reinvented had gone through dramatic transformation. We know, right? This is the phone I grew up with. And then just before the iPhone, this is the phone that was on the market. It's called a feature phone. But ultimately, the difference between the rotary dial and the Nokia was not substantial. Ultimately, what were they both doing? They were connecting people. It was a communication device, right? It really didn't change. Form factor changed. This was great. I could put it in my pocket. I could walk around. It was wireless, but ultimately allowed me to reach out and touch somebody. And what did I use to connect with them? I used either voice or text, right? And that was a revolution. It was huge that you could take voice and text and you could use it anywhere. But ultimately, you were using this machine to interface with a human on the other end. What was profound about the iPhone was it was the first Internet of Things thing, right? Or the first internets of thing. And the reason it was is that, yes, you could call on an iPhone, and yes, you could text on an iPhone, and to be honest, text was the killer app on the iPhone. Text usage actually didn't dip with the iPhone. It actually, it saw a tremendous uplift because it was a human device. It was easier to text. You still use text. But ultimately, what this device had that the rotary dial or the Nokia feature phone didn't have was a bunch of sensors. Right? This was packed with sensors. They suddenly would become cheap enough that you could shove them into the phone. They had miniaturized to the point where you could shove them into a phone. And this did what? Rhetorically, it allowed that person to reach out and touch this machine, right? This stormtrooper in a very, very human way. So they weren't only reaching out through this device to call home. They were reaching into this device to grab data, and this device was reading them in a very ambient way, and that reading of the individual in an ambient way made them almost like another person. The phone could sense certain things about you and intuit certain values, which allowed you to have a very symbiotic relationship with this thing. So it wasn't really a machine. It was a wearable. It was something that was understanding the owner in a way which allowed for, I'm thinking in Japanese. I live in Japan. Ishin Denshin, if anybody's from Japan. But a language that didn't require words, right? So ultimately, what we had here is duct tape, but I'm going to call this human duct tape, right? This is human duct tape. It's connecting the person to the M, the machine. And over the next few slides, we're going to talk about what that means to you and how to harness this value as we move forward. And as we move forward from phones as the first IoT thing to other pieces of your environment as hoteliers and how that's going to impact you. So CES, wow, it was so much fun. Who was there? You got to go next year, guys. It's so much fun. And it's a candy factory. And what was so exciting was the human duct tape, connecting all these things, these inanimate things that suddenly, like the iPhone, had human currency, right? So home was a big one, right? Cars, cameras, lighting, appliances, work, even pets. These are all pieces of your guest's experience. These are all pieces that impact the way that they take vacations, the way they interact with their homes, and ultimately the way they're going to interact with your hotels. The human duct tape is an interesting thing because if you connect it to anything, it creates a certain heightened value. So let's start with something profoundly important, a bottle of Fireball whiskey. So if I take some human duct tape and I connect this inanimate object with a Hero 4 camera, right? Nick Woodman's Hero 4 camera. And suddenly, this bottle takes on an ambient life that we never thought was possible. So suddenly, you put it in a wedding, and of course you have to start with the bride, and suddenly, this bottle is not a bottle of whiskey, this bottle is part of the wedding. This bottle is a participant in the wedding with the bride, and of course her cousin, and his newborn baby, and of course all the bridesmaids. This bottle now tells a story. Narrative is one of the most important things we have as humans. Narrative is why we take vacations. That's why Snapchat's so huge, and Instagram. It's because it's not the vacation, it's the story about the vacation. Why is Snapchat moved to Snap Stories? because it's about the narrative. Storytelling is why we connect as humans. That's why we remember stories, but we don't remember facts or figures. We as humans need a narrative, and what the IoT does to things like a Fireball whiskey is connect that narrative. What we have here is essentially a thing plus human duct tape with an action attached. That's one of the big elements of the IoT. The thing is, if you just work with that logic and you take a thing and you shove a GoPro camera, hopefully a waterproof one, inside your dishwasher, it is a thing plus an action. It just doesn't have a profound impact on your life. It's cool. It's cool. I've never seen inside my dishwasher. I think that's very cool. But it's not providing me a profound change in my lifestyle. It's not really giving the dishwasher superpowers, right? So it's not just an abstract action. It's an action that has value and currency. So this is an action that is transforming the dishwasher because, hey, I had to go downstairs into the kitchen and I had to turn the knob, right? And if you study knobology, knobs aren't a great thing. It's not a great interface. It's not really human, right? And so if I can text my dishwasher, wow, that's great. I can change cycles, just like I'm asking my daughter to please come back before midnight, right? And we talked about this in Brussels, but I just have to talk about it again because I just love this example of IoT, which is this inanimate basketball, which always knew that your game sucked, but couldn't tell you, right? So suddenly you shove a sensor in a basketball, and the basketball can tell you a whole bunch of stuff. It can say, hey, you know what? If you just, moved your dribble force a little bit to the left, and then you shot with a bit more of a spin, you may get some stuff through the net, right? That information then can be aggregated to the coach. It gives visibility. Suddenly the basketball has a voice, right? This inanimate object is speaking to you very much the same way that your phone intuits your behavior, right? So you've got these cast of characters who historically have always wanted to have the IoT. Fred, and Dick have always wanted to have superpowers, right? They always wanted to put things on themselves that could allow them to interact at a heightened level. We know that permeates right through pop culture, right? And so it's no surprise that the first thing people think about with these machines is shoving them, into your, here I haven't got one, I've got some jewelry. But ultimately, if you put it on, this is the first step in the IoT. But when you walk around the floor at CES and you see, just beautiful design, bands that monitor and transmit data and convey emotions, beautiful designs from LG and Philips to allow you to put machines on your body and create sort of heightened engagement. Are great. They're wonderful examples, and I can't go through them all, but one good example is BMW with Samsung have partnered to create an ambient car that is all controlled through your wrist. Literally, you can park your car, it maps the way into the garage, and by pushing a call button, your car wakes up. It doesn't only beep, as it did in the 90s, it actually drives out and comes to meet you on the street. Yeah? That is a relationship, essentially, that you had with your dog at home, suddenly you have with your car, right? This is a wonderful example of gadgets in the IoT. This is called Nixie. It has an Intel chip inside. It uses the Edison chip. And what it is essentially something, it wraps, it's a quadcopter, it wraps around your wrist, you pull it off your wrist, and just like a boomerang, you throw it out, It goes out, it hovers, it films you, and then comes back and attaches to your wrist. It's so beautiful. It's wonderful, but ultimately, all these things are just gadgets, right? And where is the narrative? Where is the heightened story that's going to excite our guests and create value to us and them in this project called travel, right? So a lot of these things, as we know, were bundled up and given to mom and dad for Christmas, right? And that makes a whole pile of sense. We continue to do that in technology, right? But the problem is we also, a month later, jettison it into the bottom of a drawer somewhere, right? Because it didn't quite fit into our lifestyle. It wasn't quite seamless, right? So there's always a concern that in a new sort of emerging technology, that under the socks in the drawer, you're going to find sort of a museum of technology that you never really used, right? And this museum of technology is going to continue to be jettisoned into your sock drawer if it's treated as basically the physical app store. So we know that the app store is really fun, right? We hang out there a lot, we download a lot of things, but ultimately we all know, and I'm sure a lot of keynotes that you've listened to have said the same thing, you know, ultimately there are 6 or maybe 10 apps that we use on a regular basis. Everything else is phone top roadkill, right? It gets lost into a folder. We may get the reach because we use a lot of marketing dollars to get them to download that app, but we don't get the frequency because, hey, I haven't hung out in your hotel in a long time and it's in a folder somewhere called travel, and So ultimately, if we treat the physical, these physical IoT things, which are wonderful, as another app store, it becomes a novelty. You're going to find, you know, the Apple Store and Samsung, you know, Galaxy experience. You're going to find that they're going to have all these wonderful physical apps for you to buy. We just don't know which ones are going to be there to stuff stockings for 2015. So here's a bicycle. It's actually developed in Toronto, where I live. It's called Van Hooks. It's a smart bike. Why is it a smart bike? It has sensors all over it. That makes sense, right? If somebody comes up to your left or your right, it vibrates. It allows you to do a whole pile of fun things. This is another app. Okay, but what makes it profoundly different is that if Billy Bob is on a Van Hoek's bicycle and hits a pothole, Susie Q, who is also using a Van Hoek's bicycle and goes down the same road, the bike will alert it that there's a pothole so she can move to the left or the right. That is the magic of where we're going with the IoT. Another example would be Nest. Nest, hey, it's a great little, you know, thermostat utility that Google picked up. But ultimately, that in and of itself is an IoT app. It's cool, but there's a lot of competition in that space. They picked up another company called Dropcam. They networked these two, and then at CES they got 15 partners to launch their products in conjunction with Nest. So now you're creating an ecosystem where one device is working with another with the same standard, with certain shared values. This becomes a network for the home. It becomes easier to consume as the next generation shopper, and it allows you to create sort of incremental value, because one thing is working with another thing, and suddenly you create an ecosystem of value for the consumer, and you get more buy-in. At the show, there was, again, this whole proliferation of companies, big hitters, that want to be in the network space. So you get Intel with their Edison chip that goes into this spider dress. It actually goes behind, there's a little, behind at the back of her bra, the chip sits there. And ultimately, what this does is all the dark nodes are proximity sensors, and then around around her bra, if you notice here, this is the bra, and this thing here is not the bra. That's another sensor which measures her breath. And so ultimately, if you come too close to her, those spider things go up. And if she says, you know what, that's okay, they go down. Yeah, it's kind of fun, right? So, and a huge utility, I think. Yeah. So, but ultimately, why Intel's really hot on maker culture, right? Is because if they come out with chips like the Edison or this one called Curry, which is just a button, then makers, and there's a huge market, maker culture can take this and throw it into their physical, project and make them ambient, make them interactive. That creates a business for Intel because it becomes a network. Another chip manufacturer, Qualcomm, huge, gigantic company a little bit south of here, really dominates the market. I don't know if you know this, but it's just unbelievable. Every single device that you buy, they take a huge tax on because they nearly have every single patent in the 3G space. So look at this. On every chip that's released into the global market on 3G, look how much money these guys are taking home versus Qualcomm. Well, Qualcomm's in a bit of a bind because Qualcomm, with the next generation phones, doesn't own a dominant position with patents. So their revenue is just going to go through the toilet because they'd be basically sitting and cashing checks, trying to do some R&D here and there, but ultimately they're cashing in on sort of forensic opportunities. What they need to do is reinvent their business model into the future. So IoT comes, they say there's an opportunity. Things are changing. What is the one thing in this room that is probably more prevalent on a multiple than the cell phones you have and are using right now? Light bulbs. Exactly. Light bulbs. So what do? They create a chip. And this chip right here, it has a little Wi-Fi module, and it has an on-off module. And this is the way that Qualcomm is going to stay relevant in the next generation, because now, and this is the head engineer of IoT, they can create multiples in the marketplace with this chip because everybody is going to have to embed an on-off switch with a Wi-Fi so it can beam back to a hub to say, do you want me off? Do you want me on? Do you need me dimmed? So when I walk into this place, it can customize my experience on a one-to-one basis as opposed to one-to-many. Right? So, and it all comes down to a multiple of value. It becomes a network effect. So let's go back to our math. A thing plus human duct tape plus an action that's relevant and significant and creates some value, plus human duct tape, plus network, right? So now we're starting to understand where we're heading here. So this is the Nexus phone. Who has a Nexus phone here? Anybody? No? Not one? Oh, thank you, sir. The most important man in the room. There you go. So, who makes this phone? Do you know? Who manufactures this phone?
The Google.
The Google. Absolutely. Who actually manufactures the physical phone? Is it LG? Is it? Motorola? Yeah. Anybody else? Any other OEMs in there? Well, actually, it's interesting because it was first developed by Samsung, and then it was developed by LG, and right now, you're absolutely correct, sir, it is made by Motorola. Do we care? No, and that's the point. This is such an exciting phone, and I would recommend that you buy it as your next phone, because it doesn't matter who makes it. These guys are simple OEMs, and they've been commoditized. Why? It's because we're buying the software. We're buying an Android experience. When you buy this phone, like I've got a very expensive Samsung Note 4, the fastest phone in the world, right? This operating system on Nexus is superior to this operating system because Google always updates this operating system before this one, right? This is KitKat, that's Lollipop, right? And so ultimately, this is a better phone because this is Google's, HQ. This is an Android device, and it doesn't matter who made it. Why this is so important is, let's look at cars. And I would look closely at cars if I were you as an industry. Because, everybody loves hotels, but ultimately it's not the focus of the industry right now. The focus of the industry is homes, businesses, and cars. Because if I can crack the home and I can crack the car, I dominate. I can take whatever I develop for the home and I can apply it to the hotel pretty much seamlessly. But I still have to dominate the home. I also have to dominate, mind share with the consumer. And the car is a battleground. Why? Because we spend an inordinate amount of time in a car. And increasingly so, it seems, according to the presentation that we had the other day. So this is a battleground. And who is in this battleground? Well, obviously Apple. So they have CarPlay as a platform for the car. And good old Google, right? And they have the Open Automotive Alliance. And these two guys are vying for mind share in the car, while these guys are making the car. Well, could you see a time where you have an affinity to an operating system that's built by Google, built by Apple, and you have a car, maybe a Toyota, and you have it for 2 years, but you know what? I kind of want to get a new car. I get to take my experience and take it seamlessly from this edifice and move it to my new Ford. It makes that transition seamless for the consumer. And it allows the Googles of the world to own the relationship with the customer. That is not only the final foot, we're talking about inches, right? And so if you look at this model and you look at your hotels, ultimately what happens inside your physical hotels is going to be profoundly important for you going down the road, because that is going to be the experience. It's not going to be necessarily the beds and the check-in. It's going to be the experience, right? We talked a lot about experience at this conference. So you have Samsung. Samsung launches, well, they bought a company called SmartThings, a little presumptuous title, and ultimately they've launched this whole sort of ecosystem around SmartThings. This is the App Store, right? These are little gizmos and widgets and things that are kind of cool. But could you see a time where Samsung goes and says, you know what? I have the ability to actually create a community. So you have a housing development project. Could you see a time where you're not just buying a housing developing project called Greenfield somewhere up in sort of North Maine? Suddenly, you're buying into a Samsung community. Why would you ever do that? Well, Samsung makes every single thing in that house, right? Dishwashers, fridges, all those gizmadoos that we just saw. But it also provides a huge security layer, right? Samsung for enterprise, Samsung Safe, potentially is what we need to create a safe environment for a network community where we have a huge concern about privacy and security going forward. And now, not only what happens in the browser and our PC and our phones are in jeopardy, but our lifestyle is in jeopardy. What happens if somebody hacks into our home? What happens if somebody hacks into our car? What if it's a self-driving car and somebody hacks into our car? So, security and privacy are going to be huge issues. Maybe you buy a Samsung community because of that. So ultimately, these are the stakes that are on the table right now. And so when you get, one of the Samsung CEOs, they have a number, but BK Yoon presenting at CES, presenting what he calls an open platform. We heard the word open before, right? The Open Automotive Alliance. This is his open platform. Remember one thing, and if you can remember one thing from my presentation, please remember this. Open is a 4-letter word. And why is that important? Because whoever owns the open platform owns your guest. And you, as hoteliers, need to understand that you need to take a position in this ecosystem. Otherwise, you look at your hotel, and it's on a green screen. And if you don't take control of that green screen, what you're going to be left with is this, the edifice. And we know that the edifice is great, but ultimately the relationship is better. So if somebody like Google comes in and owns the green screen, you left with the physical relationship, which is not going to drive stickiness ultimately long term. So let's talk about this one more time, our math. So we got a thing, plus human duct tape, plus an action, plus a network, plus what is essential to make this all tie up with a bow? It's data. It's a relationship with your customer, which is going to be the ultimate piece of the IoT. And if you just think that the IoT is going to be something that's kind of cute and turn, give you the ability to your guests to change the lighting in their room or move the blinds up and down, you're missing the opportunity. The opportunity is enhancing things with a network that you own, and that you can mine data and have a relationship with them. So let's talk specifically about hotels for a second. So we know with hotels that a thing has become a liability, right? Things are hard. They break. It's a challenge, right? So a thing has become a liability, so we're in the business right now of creating smart things, right? We're in the Samsung business. Right? So we do keyless entry. Oh, how cool is that? Right? So that is great. That is taking a thing. What's a thing? It's a door. It's giving you keyless entry, convenience. The challenge is that this is like the Nixie. It's cool. You can throw it in the air. It takes a picture. It comes back. Great. What's the end game? It's a great marketing strategy. This was a great campaign. But ultimately, what's next? And I'm not saying that Starwood doesn't have a what's next. I'm saying there needs to be a what's next. So we're trying to attach things to actions. And we know that Starwood didn't start this. This was started actually in Korea with the hotel Sky Park Central that partnered with LG to create sort of a guest experience where you can change the temperature, you can move up and down the blinds as we talked about, and have keyless entry. Great. So where do we go from here? The biggest challenge we have as hoteliers and as anybody who's running a business is what you wake up to in the morning is what you're going to focus on. And that's just human nature. So when the manager of this hotel wakes up in the morning, what are they thinking about? What are they thinking? Are they thinking about the IoT? I very much doubt it. But what are they thinking about? Occupancy. They think about occupancy. They're thinking about, oh my gosh, I've got a broken toilet in room 2205. I have to get the windows cleaned. I've got these issues. I've got lots of issues with this physical thing, right? What this hotel is probably thinking about is, oh my gosh, I got somebody stuck in the lift, right? Yeah. Right? That's me. So, so you're running a hotel and running elevators and all these things that can break. That is what preoccupies somebody who owns a hotel and manages a hotel. It's very difficult for them to go, while they may be cognizant that it's really important to create a digital relationship and all these things that Gary's talking about, oh my gosh, it's evening and I got to go home, right? By the time they deal with it. So, the thing is, when you need to look at your hotel, essentially it's like a brawn toothbrush base, right? This is your hotel over here. And the business that you're in is not the hotel, it's the relationship that you have with your guests to drive incremental value on top of that foundation. And that incremental value now is becoming a digital relationship. We know that. That's your business. It's the same business that HP is in, right? They make money on this stuff, right? And it's the same business that Amazon's in, because we know that the Fire Phone is a big dud, but they keep on coming out with them because ultimately they don't make money on the phone. They make money on one-click checkout. So they need to be close to the consumer and give them the goods to curate the conversation into their checkout to make money. This is this is your ink modules. This is the same as your toothbrush refills. This is the business of creating incremental value on your physical base. So when you have a hotel and your digital strategy essentially is tethering yourself with Steve Jobs' human duct tape to the App Store, that is a good strategy. That is a good strategy. But ultimately, it can't be your only strategy. Because if you have a physical hotel and that physical edifice is becoming more and more interactive and you're relegated to the App Store, what are you doing when they come in through the door? You can't just be sitting on the App Store with 3 alerts, 3 notifications. There has to be something more. And so, and Apple knows this, and they know they have to have physical relevance, and so they come out with a beacon strategy. Well, what is a beacon? A beacon is a little rinky-dink toy that you attach that has minimal range and can trigger something inside the app. Why does Apple push beacons? Why does Apple push beacons, you think? Well, why were they all excited about beacons? Why is iBeacons a big thing for them? Sorry?
Data collection.
Well, indirectly, yes, it is. But what they really are trying to do is make sure that their apps continue to be relevant as we move into the IoT. So to give their apps a sense of physical proximity. And that's a big thing as we move into this new sort of engagement opportunity. But what happens is when you have a beacon and you have an app, what you're doing is continuing to focus on an app which resides in the cloud and just triggering one-way notification when somebody's in proximity. You're not creating an enhanced relationship with your physical environment. You're not creating a one-to-one relationship. Ultimately, you're just enhancing the app's ability to talk to that consumer. And so what the apps do is they help Apple sell phones, which is great. Apps and the SDK, as we've discussed before, is Apple's best marketing platform they have to sell their phones. There's nothing wrong with this. This is a good strategy. But you have to go beyond the app and beacons. You have to think of the entire hotel and maybe stop thinking about the phone, because God bless Steve Jobs, the phone is a big focus for him because he came out with the first IoT thing. But maybe the phone is the center of the universe for Apple. But maybe for you guys, you don't want to think of the phone as the center of the universe. You want to think of your hotel as the center of the universe. You want to think of your hotel as the app. And you want to think of the phone as, with human duct tape, being attached to your app called the hotel. So that the phone isn't the center. It's not where everything lives. The phone is a trigger to change your hotel, to create a one-to-one relationship. And you can do that a number of ways, right? Absolutely, you should have an app, and you should be thinking about how you can use NFC and other sort of ways of engaging with your physical hotel. But you can also use things like Wi-Fi, and if you use Wi-Fi, you don't need an app. You can have engagement, you can opt somebody into the MAC address, and you can have an engagement off the Wi-Fi, which, guess what? Wi-Fis are super powerful beacons. It's all branding that we think of Wi-Fi as being a analytics tool and beacons being an engagement tool. Really, what you have to think about in the IoT is that everything becomes a beacon. We're moving into LTE Direct. LTE Direct is the ability for new phones coming into the market to be beacons, so that not only can I interact with the hotel directly without an app, but I can interact with you directly without an app based on certain permission and profiling. So everything becomes a beacon. So you don't have to get little rinky-dink beacons. Everything is a beacon. Your Wi-Fi is a beacon. You have to think of things as radiating ambient commands and discussions based on permission and proximity. So that's sort of it. I wanted you to take away the idea that ultimately, in order to be relevant, you got to put yourself in the center. Don't be disintermediated by guys who come in with open platforms that seem to solve your problems, that ultimately leave you holding the physical baby when you really need to own the data and the relationship. So thank you very much. I have 10 minutes and we can chat further. Any questions? Yes.
I do have a question. So as you probably know, hotels, resorts, casino groups, they have their own apps, or even theme parks, whoever.
Right.
And the challenge is that a small portion of people actually visiting the property actually download and use these apps. Okay. So my question to you is there an opportunity for one universal app to work across all venues and parks and hotels in a way that the hotel is actually the owner of the data?
Right.
Is that an active proposition?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways of doing that. And obviously you can aggregate, an app can be an aggregator. Amazon, eBay, PayPal, these are all aggregation apps, and therefore they have relevance to the consumer and they don't become phone top roadkill. But it's very difficult, I would presume, even based on the laws of engagement on this panel, or on this platform, that I'm not even supposed to talk about stats and hotels specifically. You guys work together, but in a very collegial way. You're probably not going to have a super hotel app where all of you guys are going to participate and own data and share data. That would be good if you could pull that together. The retail sector has done that. I don't know if you know MCX, Merchant Consumer Exchange, but a lot of retail folk have got together and partnered to basically try and disintermediate the payment guys, so that they can capture more interchange and data. So there are ways to do it, but you have to work collectively to make that happen. The other opportunity you have is maybe not fixate on apps, because apps are great, but apps are sometimes overbuilt for what you need them to do. So as I indicated, you can use things like Wi-Fi to create an opt-in. So when somebody jumps onto your Wi-Fi, which they're always going to do when they come into your lobby, when they jump into the Wi-Fi, you know that every one of these has a unique MAC, right? A unique identifier. One of these, your tablet, everybody has a unique one. When you jump on, that's how the Wi-Fi knows that you are you, right? So if you attach to that MAC some opt-in, for example, you say, hey, give me your phone number. Join the Hyatt VIP community by jumping onto the Wi-Fi. Then the Wi-Fi essentially becomes your interactive network. And now when I walk by Hotel X anywhere in the world, the Wi-Fi is going to identify me at least a block away, right? Because my Wi-Fi signal identifies me a block away. I don't necessarily have to have the power to jump on the Wi-Fi. It just has to sniff me, right? And then I can talk to them. I can say, hey, welcome to the hood, dude. Come on in for a coffee. I can have a relationship. When I see the door swing, I can change the conversation. I can move them around. I can say, hey, I know you're on the 4th floor. You're probably going to bed. would you like a newspaper tomorrow? That's all with an app. So it is possible. Ultimately, you have to think creatively about the way that you interact with that consumer, and don't spook them, right? And make a secure and a relevant and a delightful relationship where they're coming back for more. Anybody else? There's one over here.
Thanks, Gary. So from a practical standpoint, as a guest in a hotel and an expert in the internets of thing, what would you, as a guest, like to see a hotel property incorporate into your guest experience to make your stay easier?
Beyond anything infrastructural, because obviously I can't speak to that, but beyond carpets and yes, blinds and things like that. Obviously, for me, it's the same. I mean, I would just look to the car and the home. What is the ideal experience that you want in your home? Because the ideal experience you want in your home is, I would presume, to a large extent, the kind of experience you want here. Right? So you want to come into your home. What happens in the smart home of the future is that the whole house can sense that I'm in proximity, that I'm driving home. It can alert my family that I'm in the hood. It can turn on my coffee machine, get my coffee ready. It can change the lighting. It can raise the temperature of the house for energy efficiency reasons. It can put on music so that it's playing some jazz when I come home. And that's an ambient house, right? And there are more. It can help me with all different aspects. It knows that, when I leave, I switch on the dishwasher. Those elements are the customized experience of a one-to-one relationship that I expect when I come into a hotel. I want, and I think we talked about this, in the old days, when you came in and there's somebody who greets you is going to make sure that they know your name, that they introduce you to the check-in, that somebody says, hey, Gary, Mr. Schwartz, what can we do for you? I mean, the big innovation was when you came into your room, it said Gary Schwartz on the TV. All these things that were very recent, but ultimately that's where we have to take it and then go further. We need to know our guests, as we did in the old days. Retailers are in the same situation. They've lost contact. They've lost the human element that drives stickiness and loyalty. And if you can create a personalized one-to-one experience where the room reacts to you in a way that changes the heating, that the lights are set, that there's certain music that conforms to your taste as opposed to elevator music that I'm getting generically, those are things that make your stay more memorable, ultimately. I don't know if that answers, but I mean, those are... So I'll show you a picture. So here, this is, I was going to do Jules. That's the privacy guy that you were talking about yesterday at the Future Privacy Forum. I thought that would come up as a question, but I'm not Google. So this is, I just thought fun. This is from CES. So this is the Samsung booth. And everybody's coming in and out of the Samsung booth with all the smart things. And I just love this because here you've got this lady counting people coming in and out of the Samsung booth with a manual clicker. Isn't that great? Classic. It's great. Exactly. Well, they haven't quite worked out networking smart things right now. Another thing that I thought would be interesting to just chat about is the maps. I think maps are hugely underutilized. Maps are a huge opportunity for you guys, and not POI, not points of interest. I mean, you have to go beyond that. The big opportunity in maps is, you guys use Waze, the application Waze? Yeah? So Waze is great, it's a great utility for driving. It allows essentially, for you to share experiences with other people and then crowdsource, direction. Why haven't we gone further with a map in storytelling? Why do people have experiences around your hotel that are all based on journeys? Why don't we track them? Why don't we plot them? Why don't we show guests experiences in our neighborhoods and to see that, oh, this is Sally's journey through our neighborhood. And she checked in the hotel, maybe, you know, she went up the road and had a great experience at a restaurant. Snapchat and all these things are about recording that journey. That's, again, putting a human face on your physical neighborhood. That's green, you know, absolutely, you know, a virgin opportunity for the industry. That's it. I guess I'm sort of coming up on my witching hour. If you guys want any chat with me, I'm available and around all day today, and I think I'm on a panel at the end on disruptors. So I look forward to chatting further. Thank you. On sort of retail devolution in the malls that you may be interested in, first come, first serve. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Gary. And